What's up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls around the world? I would like to welcome you back to another episode of Real Talk with Zuby. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking to another artist. She is based out of Detroit, Michigan. She recently hit the headlines in a couple different countries, in the US news and in Canadian news as well, for pulling out of a festival where they were doing something a little bit crazy with the ticket prices, but we will get into that. Tiny Jag, I would like to welcome you to the show. How you doing?
Thank you so much. I am doing very well. Thank you so much for having me today, Zuby. I appreciate it.
That is all good. Always good to talk to another artist. So
Likewise.
I've done a really brief intro there. So why don't you tell the people a little bit more about who you are?
Okay, so yeah, I'm Tiny Jag. My first name is Jillian. Either one is fine. But I am a rapper, singer, songwriter from Detroit. I have been producing music at this level and taking it this serious for about a year and a half now, maybe about 18 months now. I have headline shows here as well as Chicago and Austin, Texas, as well as New York. Had a lot of fun, done a lot of shows, upwards of like maybe 60 shows in the last year and a half. So had
Oh,
a
wow.
lot, have had a lot of fun. And yeah, I'm ready to get it figured out.
That's awesome. So how would you describe your music to somebody who hasn't listened yet? I checked out a couple of tracks on Spotify. I liked, is it Riding?
Writing, yes.
Riding. That was the one. That one's really catchy. I listened to a few others as well.
Thank you.
But how would you just define your music to somebody who hasn't heard it?
Dual is the word I like to use quite a bit, because on one hand, you get that just undeniable, just like rage sound, that is just very electric, very alive, very purposeful, aggressive, but at the same time, there are principles that are coded in that music. There are things that are very close to my heart coded in that music. It's just wrapped up in a very expressive way that is able to be a therapeutic outlet for me, and it allows me to be peaceful on a regular basis, that I can let it out like that. So that is definitely what it is for me, a very cathartic medium for me that just so happens to be therapeutic for those who listen to it as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting talking to you right now because, I can tell you're very chilled, measured, amiable person. In the music, though, there's definitely like an underlying tone of angst or aggression in there.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So you talked about the overall message and the substance you're putting out there. I mean, I'm a rapper myself. I know how hard it is. I never ask someone, what do you rap about? Because I know it's an impossible question to answer. But I'd say your overall message, you might have an answer to this, you may not, but would you say you kind of have an overall message that you want to put out to the world?
Due to how big is just a lack of a better word, due to how just impactful of a decision it was to decide to do music full time because it was true to me. My message is always about following your heart in so many different ways. So whether it is in situations relevant to today, like inclusion and things like that, being yourself, being able to be yourself unapologetically in any room, in front of any group, within any community, being able to own that and just have agency with your existence. That is like a huge message for me. And underneath that umbrella, there are tons of other things as well, as far as women's empowerment and health. Honestly, I'm really big on getting health into the Black community, for sure. So there's a lot of that. Same with just like sustainability, even there, you can find that in the music. You can find all types of things, but they're all about, one, me making sure that I'm staying true to me and talking about things that I want to talk about, and hoping that message sends that same idea to those that are listening.
Yeah, that's dope. I love that.
Thank you.
I think in hip hop, one thing that people always say, to the point of it being a cliche, is be yourself, or be authentic, or keep it real. Keep it real is really the main cliche one. But
yeah, absolutely.
Funnily enough, I feel like in the world of hip hop and rap, at least in the modern sense, I think that's actually pretty rare. I think that keeping it real almost has two meanings. I think by real, some people kind of mean like hood or gangster
Keep it
or
street.
street. Yes, they kind of use it as a metaphor.
Right.
Whereas to me, real means, you know what? Like if you are like if you're not that, then it's not real to say that. And I mean, I
Right.
imagine in most rappers, certainly these days, are not necessarily coming from that kind of background. I think if I don't know, Drake came out and was rapping about gang banging and selling crack, it would be like that would be like, wait, hang on, but
Very
that's not his
problematic for
background.
us.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, same with myself. It's weird because I have people who, on one hand, are always like, who love me for my realness and my authenticity because I'm very open about my background and where I'm from. I've never lived in the hood. I've had a relatively privileged upbringing, and I'm totally cognizant of that. And I don't pretend in any way, shape, or form to be like out, gang banging or coming from growing up in the streets and trying to get my
Right.
mom. I'm like, I can't talk about that because that's not my story. So from the very beginning, I was like, I'm not going to try to portray myself as anything that someone can do a little background check on me and be like,
Okay.
oh, hang on, no, this guy's not what he's saying. But then on the other hand, you get people who could say, oh no, that's not real because he's not rapping about that street stuff. And I'm like,
Man,
but that's not where I'm from.
it's not real for me.
No, or with me, even with my accent, because I'm from the UK, but I didn't grow up here. So
Gotcha.
yeah, I grew up in Saudi Arabia. I went to an
Oh,
American
wow.
school. Yeah, so my accent, as you can probably hear, it's somewhere between American and British.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'll get people here in the UK who are like, "Oh, like Zuby's not real. He's trying to be American. He's trying to," and I'm like, I didn't grow up here, man. Like, I'm
Man.
like, I sound like me. I'm not gonna sound like Stormzy or Skepta or some other London
Right.
rapper because
And why do
that's
you
not
want
where
me
I'm from.
to? Why do I have to
Yeah,
sound like that to be real?
yeah. It's very strange, man. Very strange. So tell us a little bit more about your background and growing up.
Okay, yeah, it's all over the place, like all over the place. When I was born in Detroit, but right away, we were living in Hamtramck, which is actually a small town inside of Detroit. Like
Okay.
it's surrounded by at all angles by Detroit. It's the oddest thing. It's only about 2 miles wide, um, but it's right inside of Detroit. And then from there, I moved to the east side of Detroit with. So when I was born, I lived with my mother, her mother, and her mother's husband.
Okay.
So that so my mother is a biracial woman. My grandmother is a white woman, and then her husband is a white man, was a white man.
Okay.
So although he wasn't my biological grandfather, he was the only grandfather that I knew.
Mm.
So at that time, my background as far as being raised is my mother, um, and then those two, they all lived together. And that was until I was maybe 5 or 6. They moved to Kentucky, and me and my mother moved to Detroit from there.
Mm.
So I was spending maybe like 3 months out of every year out in Kentucky on the farm, which was very not a culture shock because it started happening at such a young age, but was very different from home. I'm
Yeah.
playing with the kids on the block at home, and I'm going out to the country where there's not another house for a mile this way, a mile that way.
Yeah.
And when I'm spending my day helping my papa bale hay, feeding the cows and the chickens and the goats and everybody, I'm doing that type of stuff. But then I'm coming back, during the school year, to the block,
Mm.
but I'm in private school. So that's another element. So I'm in
Okay.
private school. I live on the block. I live in Detroit,
Yeah.
but I got my country family, my white
Mm.
country family that I go feed the farm with
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the summer. So I'm like all over the place with it. So very seasoned early. And then I went to we couldn't afford my mother couldn't afford the tuition anymore for at the private school. So she wanted me to still have a good education. And at the time, because of all of the economic disparity, Detroit, the schooling is just not what we would want it to be. It wasn't then, it still isn't now. At least there are more eyes on the issue where hopefully we'll be able to move the needle in the direction that really, really matters. But
Mm.
it wasn't an ideal opportunity if we had any other options left. So it was actually more affordable for my mom to get us something small in the suburbs, so I could go to suburban public school to get the education. And so then we moved to the suburbs, And I graduated from high school in the suburbs before I went away to college, in a small community about 2 hours away from here, where I
Okay.
gained even more knowledge, and just tolerance is a big word I want to use.
Okay.
Tolerance and an understanding for things that are different around me, as if all that other stuff didn't open my eyes to plenty. But all of those experiences together, I would definitely consider very influential elements to my background, for sure.
Okay. No, that's awesome. I mean, I think there's a lot of parallels there. So I think it's, not everybody gets the opportunity to see multiple different places and cultures and interact with lots of different people from a young age.
Absolutely.
And
I'm so grateful.
yeah, I think it's one of those things that I don't want to make a sweeping statement, but I think you can tell when people have had that, and you can kind of tell when they haven't.
Absolutely.
Like where I grew up, I mean, literally from preschool, I was surrounded by people of every race, every ethnicity. I was in Saudi Arabia. They had Brits, Americans, Canadians, Arabs from the whole, like all the Arab countries. You had people from South America, Japan, China.
Wow.
And so, literally from the age of 3 or 4, like
Wow.
all my classmates, all that, and even the different religions growing up in a Muslim country. I myself am a Christian, but, you're just surrounded by it all. So one thing that strikes me, one thing that really hits me hard about these current times is that it's weird to me because, like when people start playing lots of these identity games or identity politics games and whatever, the whole thing's really weird to me because I've always grown up without that being a
With a
thing.
lot of tolerance. Yes, with
Yeah,
healthy tolerance going
yeah,
around.
it's just not being a big deal, hanging out with
Yeah.
other black people or white
No.
people or Arab
Mm,
people or
right.
Muslims or it was always just whatever. Like my circle of friends, it's just whatever. Like there's no point really using the term like I don't see race because obviously I have eyes. I can see what people visually look like, but it doesn't tell me anything beyond that. You see what I mean?
Right.
And it
Absolutely. It
seems
doesn't
weird
influence how you feel.
yeah, yeah, and it seems really weird that there seems to be this like push, and people call it progressive, but I'd say it's anything but. There's this kind of push to fall back into these factions where you know it's not just Zuby talking to Tiny Jag. This is a black man talking to a black woman. It's just like it
Yeah.
doesn't matter if I'm talking to a white guy. I'm not speaking to him as a white man. I'm just talking to whatever his name whatever his name is.
Right.
I just
Right.
don't see the world that way. And I get a lot of criticism for it. Like, I mean, you may have already seen on Twitter in the very short time, we've been
Absolutely.
interacting. Like,
You
I
know
get,
it.
yeah, I get all this. It's very strange, and I'm just like, what's going on here? So while we're on the subject, let's get to the meat, which I'm sure a lot of people are going to be anticipating, which is the issue that recently arose with this festival. So why don't you tell the story, because you're local to the story, you were involved, you were going to perform. So why don't you just run us through the story?
Okay. So I had a fellow artist that I had done a couple, or maybe not even a couple, but we had a business relationship. He had done some work for me, and he had asked if I would be willing to do a show with him and his friends. And this would have been in April. Would you like to not bark while we're trying to talk? And and I agreed because, as I said, no problem. We had
Yeah, yeah.
exchanged services before. That was not a big deal. He said it would be in July, and that was the bulk of the conversation.
Mhm.
In August, or August, no, in July, I received a direct message. I received a DM from a third party with a flyer with my face on it, with a location, a date, everything. I had not received anything since that April conversation, especially not from this third party.
Mhm.
Um, and so I didn't even make the connection. And I
Okay.
originally responded that I'm not even on this show. I
Oh
don't
yeah.
even know what this is.
Mhm.
And I checked with my manager, like, did you guys book me for something? Did you guys forget? Like, what's up? And they're like, no, we searched the emails, everything. And it was like, no. So I'm like, I don't even think I'm on this show. And they asked, like, well, did you speak to that original artist? And I'm like, well, I talk to him all the time, but not about this. But I ended up agreeing just off the strength of that relationship I had with him to
Mhm.
support the event. Um, and that was that. They sent over the promotional materials, and I began to promote the event. I don't know if it was 24 or 48 hours later, but up to 48 hours later, I got a screenshot from a white friend of mine who planned to come to the event. And when she went to buy her ticket, she saw that there was an early bird option for $10 for POC and $20 for non-POC. And the screen that she originally sent to me did not have a description beyond that
Okay.
necessarily.
For
So
anyone listening who's not familiar with the lingo, POC is person of color, aka non-white.
So from there, I gave them the benefit of the doubt, and because there was no description, and although I knew what POC meant, I'm
Yeah.
like, no way, because I've never seen anything like this. So, and I knew nothing about it, and there was no way I would assume that something like that would be going on, and I'm an artist on the show, and I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
So, I reached out to the curator that had sent me the promotional materials, and just asked for some clarification, like, what does POC mean regarding ticket sales? And I didn't get an answer right away, and I was definitely triggered in the moment for sure. So I called that original, that fellow business relationship artist. I reached out and talked to him, and he said he was unaware of that.
Okay.
And so now it was looking really interesting. So that curator ended up reaching back out, explaining that the discrepancy was to try to give Blacks the opportunity to patronize an event that they may not be able to afford, and keeping non-POC individuals with a closer proximity to wealth from buying all the tickets before any people of color would have, or Blacks would have an opportunity to purchase their tickets. I just immediately said I couldn't support the event and that I would like to be taken off all promotional materials. And then I issued an apology to my fans, because I did support that event for 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah, yeah.
So I issued an apology to my fans for anybody that may have been triggered, because I knew I was.
Yeah.
So, and it kind of just, there was a whirlwind from there. I started receiving a very intense amount of hate from, and don't get me wrong, I definitely had a couple other things to say too. I was upset.
Yeah.
But
you can say them on here.
okay, I might have made a hypothetical situation where if somebody were to ever charge my grandmother double anybody else in front of me, that somebody might be getting beat up and it wouldn't be her.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? But again, it's hypothetical, because my grandmother's late. She's not with us anymore.
Yeah.
So it's a hypothetical thing to really express just how pissed I was, though.
Yeah. I mean, I'd imagine, obviously, given your background and your family structure, which you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I mean, for you personally, that must have been, I mean, I saw it and I was like, I mean, I'm obviously, I'm obviously not a white person, right? But I was like, this is offensive to everybody.
Man.
This is both implying that non-white people, it's creating this idea that POC equals poor to begin with, or that, like, me as a Black person, like, why I can't afford to pay the extra $10, or and then obviously to a white person, it's like, wait, I'm being charged double here. Like, what's going on here? Yeah, it's just one of those things that it's very odd to me. It's like they didn't think it. They certainly didn't think it through. But
and I
but
think
carry
that's
on.
where I am now. So, but yes, so I did had a couple things to say other than the apology. But as soon as the apology came out, I started to get quite a bit of backlash from initially the local Detroit music scene and art scene.
Okay.
Which is what caught the attention of the local press, because our local press, at least the Metro Times here, they do support me as an artist.
Yeah.
And they have for a while. And so, but they did just organically catch wind of the hate, just because there was so much, and it's never happened before. I'm typically a very admired artist just because of my views. Yeah. But so it was, it shocked them, and so that was where the press began. And
so,
then here
so
we are
what
now.
what was the hate? What was the criticism being levied at you?
That I was protecting my white side and using my white privilege to dismantle what was going on. I was standing in the way of something that was fighting for equity for the Black community.
Mm.
I was ignorant to what was trying to be done. I was ignorant to the message. I'm a coon.
Wow.
I've been a lot of things. I've been a mulatto. I've been a lot of things lately. But yes, I was essentially that I was caping for the white man is
Mm.
basically the umbrella of where all of this was coming from, which is just
Wow.
out just
Was this your first time experiencing that kind of thing?
Zuby, I tell you what, absolutely. Like, I haven't even experienced anything close to this from my Black community. And it's so interesting because the night before, literally the night before all this popped off, I did like a 4, maybe even 5 hour interview with a zine that, and I am so sorry if she's going to kick my butt, but it's called Ofe Watcher. And it's because the young lady that writes the zine is talking about holding white people accountable for the microaggressions, for the things that hurt Black people as a fellow white person. As a white ally,
Mm.
she is writing about the microaggressions and different things that people of color deal with from non-people of color. And it's just a very just honest, here are my experiences type thing.
Hmm.
So the whole day before, I spend 4 hours talking about these uncomfortable circumstances I've been in because of the discrimination from non-POC, all of this stuff, just to wake up the next morning and be called a person who's caping for, like,
Yeah.
it's just not even that type of thing. So it was very, 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 I was
Eye-opening.
floored. Like
Yeah.
absolutely, I was very enlightened, not only about how people feel about this situation, but definitely how some peers feel about me.
Mm-mm.
And, and yeah, I didn't expect so many people to, the amount of individuals that I saw that agreed with it is what was so eye-opening to me, and
Yeah.
something that I do see as a silver lining, because with my message, I may have been wanting to start it. I wasn't going to start it there. I was going to start it somewhere else. And now I
Mm.
realize I have to come meet my people here
Yeah.
and start from here. So it's
Mm.
actually a tool. It ended up being something that I am definitely going to be able to use so that we can induce some real positive change. But it was a tough learning curve, Zuby, man. What?
Yeah. That's interesting. Well, I mean, right now you're talking to someone who's over the past couple of years who's been accused, called everything you've just said and beyond
Man, I've
multiple
been
times.
checking you out. They
Multiple
come for
times.
you. They come for you. They come for
Oh
you.
my gosh, I've been called a black white supremacist.
Oh
I've
yeah, I got
I've been
that.
ca- I've been called some stuff I don't even want to repeat.
I heard that.
I've been called bootlicking Uncle Tom.
Man, I had to look some stuff
Um,
up. I had to start
I,
looking stuff up. Like, I don't even know what this means.
you know what I mean? And the things that have caused this have been me saying, I'm trying to remember the first thing that ever caused this. I think like in early 2018 or late 2017, I said something about oh gosh, I said something about the ongoing demonization of white males that
Okay.
I see, in the media, in music, in Hollywood, this whole thing about, just people trashing, I don't know whether it's the hashtag white men suck hashtag, or like just people just saying, all these flippant comments and just, white men this, white men this, white men. And I'm kind of like, wait, hang on here. Like, if you're against discriminating against people based on their race or their gender or whatever, why are those people who are claiming that's what they feel, you're just then going and doing the same thing? So that's kind of like what I saw with this ticket thing. I was with any situation, I've got a very basic rule. Like, I'm just like, look, I apply the same rules to everybody. I try to treat everybody fairly. I don't care what direction it's coming from, who it's being aimed at. If someone's being racist, someone's being sexist, like I will say something, not just like, oh, it's cool if I do it, but they can't do it. Oh, I can do it. They can't do it.
Only
It's like,
right.
that's not how it works. I mean, with all these situations, I just reverse the terms. So I think, okay,
Right.
if you
And
replace the
yes.
word white with black, how would this sound?
Does anyone cringe?
Yeah, if there's a music festival and it's I don't know, there's some rock music festival going on in in Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee, and they're like, okay, white tickets are $10. If you're
You know,
black,
because
if
it
you're
almost
black,
is
if
like,
you're black, if
wait
you're
a
Asian,
minute.
if you're black, if you're Asian, $20. And I know some people will jump in now and go, "Hey, man, that's not the same." But the thing is, to me, I'm like, no, that's the same. Like
Right.
you can,
It's not, again, everyone is saying, well, we are facing it because we're facing it systemically, like we're facing it on an institutionalized level. And I understand that, but then we
mm,
need to fight it at that level. We're not going to be able to do these very small grassroots, very like radical to a fault
mm,
type things and actually want to be able to dismantle anything. Um, it's not progressive in my opinion, and
yeah,
it lacks, like you said, it lacks thorough thought. It
mm,
lacks thinking it all the way through. It lacks the big picture. It lacks the goal. It's very right now.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
very like let's make some noise for this event right here, right now,
mm,
and we'll just take whatever consequences go with it. So I mean, I guess that is definitely what's happening at this point.
yeah. So I mean, how did you? So what was the level of? So you talked about receiving some criticism and some hate, but I'm assuming you've also had tons of support. I mean, I've seen support pouring out. I've had
Absolutely, and
people
it's getting
even when
more now.
yeah, even when I said that, because initially when I posted the thread with the screenshot, I didn't I didn't expect it to go. I mean, over 3 million people saw that. I did not expect it to go
Whoa.
remotely that far. And then
Whoa.
after it like it started going viral, I actually realized that I hadn't mentioned you for because
Wow.
I initially heard the story because you'd obviously taken that stand, and I was like, oh crap,
Right.
I need to give this lady
Thank
a
you.
shout
Thank
out,
you.
and even get her on my podcast because
I appreciate it.
I kind of came back later because over the weekend I tried to take Sundays off Twitter, but it was the whole thing was like burning up over the weekend, so I couldn't really completely detach
Wow.
from it. So I
Stay
wasn't really
unplugged.
I wasn't really on there. I kind of checked in and was like, whoa, what's going on? This thing is catching fire. So yeah, it's
Yeah, I did.
yeah. I mean, so what's the support been like actually? What's the support been like?
The support has been like, there's so many things that we could have predicted. So, of course, I'm getting support from people that I wouldn't even be near
Mm,
to start. There's some people that are very hateful people, but want to try to tweak and modify this story to fit their agenda. So we have a lot of people that are racist to Black people that just are thrilled about the division right now.
oh really?
Um, oh yeah, so that we get that. Of course, it's bottled up in just "you go girl," but as soon as I click on their page, they're the most hateful people I've ever seen. So I have a lot of that going on, but I do have just genuine, like, I'm going to tell you my
Mm,
favorite supporters are right now, and not to say to discredit any others, but they're the ones that touch my heart, and they are the mothers and the grandmothers of the biracial babies that are so worried about the life that their biracial babies are going to live.
mm,
That is who touches me the most, because they're looking for a sense similar to just the Black woman, similar to the Black mother.
mm,
We're looking for a sense every day. We're looking for something that will tell us the kids are going to be all right.
yeah.
Every day we're looking for something that'll give us a sign that the youth is that the young adult generation as well as the children are moving in the right direction and will be able to make positive change and be safe and be understanding and have tolerance and all those things. And so to know that even if just for that day, I was
Mm,
that thing for those moms, grandmothers, whoever, that were worried about that, like, wow, you are giving me hope for the fact that it might be okay.
yeah.
That is probably like, goodness sakes, because it just makes me think about, I wonder if my granny was worrying about that stuff. Like, I
Mm,
wonder, how many times my mother worries about it. I wonder, I'm not a Black mother right now, but wonder, I don't wonder honestly, because I kind of don't want to imagine it. It's painful, but I know that there's so many mothers of color that are worried about their babies.
mm,
So that was very touching to know that on behalf of these babies, that their caregivers are feeling, their guardians and caregivers are feeling some type of positivity from just something that was innate to me, something that was
Yeah.
like, that was just a natural reaction to
Yeah.
me.
Well, you'll find that you'll get a ton of respect and are getting a ton of respect simply for having principles and living by them and not bowing down to the mob or the
Thanks.
criticism
Thank
that
you.
will come. I mean, I've reached the stage where I've, I've given up any hope of appeasing certain people because I'm just like, you know what, like that ship sailed so long ago for me now that I'm kind of like, look, I'm just going to be Zuby. I'm going to say what I say. Some people are going to like it. Some people won't like it.
Man.
Some people are, but it's like nothing can be thrown at me that hasn't already over the course of certainly the past 2 years. And yeah, I think especially in the world of music, people are very quick to bend the knee or pander or everyone wants to be liked by everyone. I think as an artist, especially, I think there's that innate thing in you. As an artist, you want to be liked, right? You create art, you make music, you want people to like you. You don't want to have conflict and enemies and all that kind of stuff for the most part. Especially, I guess, amongst people who you feel are part of your community, whether that's geographically or, however people draw those lines. In the US, people use the term a lot, like the Black community. It's not really a term I use myself because I don't think there is a Black community per se, but I think maybe on a local level, but not in. When people talk about the whole US Black community, I'm kind of like, is it really a community? Like, that's not what the word community means to me personally. So I don't use the term. I don't use the term because I can't. There are how many million Black Americans are there?
Right.
And they're all different individuals with different views, different experiences, different things. So I don't like this whole idea of just categorizing them as a block.
That's a good point, because I think it leaves room for ambiguity like this, where it doesn't leave room for that variance in views.
Yeah, exactly. Because you'll do this, and then they'll say, "Oh, you're not standing for the Black community," and you're kind of like, "Well, no, you're a Black woman, and you're standing for what you personally believe in. Like that doesn't mean every other Black woman or every other Black man is going to agree with you, but it's like, well, why should you?"
And just me being a Black woman standing in what I believe in is me standing for the Black community.
Yeah.
But just doing that alone, whether anybody else agrees with it or not, living in my truth is empowering to my people.
Yeah, it is.
If we would all do it a little bit more, we would be in a better place.
Yeah. So, and then you can have the conversations, if people think,
man,
what the weirdest thing with a lot of this stuff is you'll find that people jump straight to epithets and insults.
Oh man.
Okay.
What?
So, I mean, I completely agree with your position, right? But say somebody who didn't, it's weird that they would just jump to accuse you of something or call you a bad name or call you some kind of slur or maybe even something racist rather than say, "Oh, that's interesting. Why did you make that decision? What was your thinking process? What are your views?" In which case, I think if you express them, it's quite glaring. I mean, to me, it was very glaringly obvious off the bat.
Right.
Like, I didn't need to look into it. It's like, because that goes against my principles. Because my principles, like I said, doesn't matter if it's black on white or white on black or
and that's Jewish or Asian or whatever.
No, exactly. It's but I do have but I've got white people in my family. Like my sister, two of my sister-in-laws are white, and obviously some of my nieces and nephews are thus mixed race. So, and it's like whatever. Like I feel like I've been over the race thing since I was like 2. Do you know what I mean? Like I've just been over it. Like people drag me into this conversation and that one, and I'm just like, really, like I don't.
It is touchy. It's heightened, and I mean for good reason. But it is definitely an exhausting conversation for sure. But it's like you said, it's necessary.
Talk to me a little bit more about the situation in the U.S. because I'm obviously here in the U.K. and I've grown up in a whole different part of the world, and I think that the view on subjects like this between the UK and the US, I think, is pretty different. And I guess some of that is expected given the very different histories of the country. So in the US, it seems like there are far more racial boundaries in general, or racial delineations even. Like people identify with their race more in the US, and people talk about race a lot more. It's just a much bigger deal there. Whereas in the UK, it's not something that is really, people delineate more along, say, class than
Gotcha.
race, right? So in the UK, you might hear people more talking about like working class and middle class and upper class, but not so much like white people, black people. What it's more of a class distinction than a race
Absolutely.
distinction. So that's one of the big differences between the UK and the US. But I mean, what's it like for you, say in Detroit, or what are your thoughts on that whole situation in the wider world?
I say one of the main things I want to point out is that it has changed over time. I remember
Mm,
when I was younger, it was always something that it was kind of right in there with like religion and politics. It was something that you kind of try not to talk about,
mm,
um, just to keep peace or whatever or what have you. And over time, because of things that have changed, current events, the media, our actual ability to access news and things of that nature, and then also our just so many different things have now made it to the point where we're talking a lot more about race, um, whether we feel as if whether we've done anything to find out anything about it or not. Everybody definitely has something to say about it because it definitely is something that touches everybody. There's nobody
mm,
who's unaffected. So it definitely has become more of something that people will bring up very nonchalant over time, though, for sure. It was
mm,
something that we kind of it was a little bit more taboo to bring those things up. But I think that change is necessary, just because of those conversations that we do need to have. We need to know where we are. We are only going to get where we want to go if we know where we are and if we know where we've been. We put a lot of focus on where we've been,
mhm.
and that's a good reason too, because a lot of us were taught one thing where we're learning now another thing was the truth, and we're learning a history that isn't necessarily ours, on top of the fact that we had a lot of our history taken from us. So
Mhm.
it's just like, I think that these conversations are necessary. I'm happy to be having them. I do think we need to be more tactful with
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
more sensitive with them, more tolerant, and just
Mhm.
more understanding. It the touchiness hasn't gone away. Just
Mhm.
because we're doing it more frequently and at the dinner table and stuff like that doesn't mean that it's not as just as triggering. It's not just as touchy. And that because we haven't been talking about it for so long, we need to understand that there are plenty of areas where we could be ignorant.
Yeah.
So
So
I
overall, do you think it's good that it's becoming more of a hot topic, shall we say, or do you think it was better when it was less spoken about?
It's hard to say because with the good comes the bad, but I would say it overall it's good. It's the
Okay.
only way we're going to get somewhere that we need to go. We got to get this stuff out, even if it's just to get it off of everyone's chest type of thing, even if it's a therapeutic thing so that people can see clearly.
Mhm.
That's necessary. But I think it's even bigger than that. It's for that, and then from that does come the actual change. That's where how we get the needle move. We have to talk about it, figure it out, come together, move the needle.
Yeah.
So I think it's necessary, especially at a socioeconomic level in conjunction with the race, because that is how we will get, like I said, that's how we'll get our agency. That's how we will get our power. That's how we will be able to claim our space, and not have to do stuff like this to do so.
Mm.
We'll be able to have that pride. We'll be able to have things that are just true to our culture and be expressive about it without feeling triggered by the sight of something that is different than us.
Yeah.
So I think it would make us, again, like I said, which is a huge message of mine, more unapologetic with about who we are, whereas we wouldn't even need to put anyone else or obligate anyone else to do anything in the conversation or in the event or in the anything. We don't need to put those types of obligations on other communities or other races or anything like that, because we got ourselves so sewed up and we're so on the same page and we're so strong and ready to pour into ourselves that we don't even need to make that distinction. It's not even necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, it's one of those big topics where wow, I don't want to say I land myself in hot water because I quite like hot water, so I tend to jump into it. But I know that
Cracking up.
I have a lot of unpopular opinions when it comes to a lot of this stuff, which anyone who knows me is familiar with that. But it's always interesting for me to I'm a big fan of conversation. It's conversations. It's why I have a podcast. It's like why I like to
Absolutely.
talk to people from people I agree with, people I disagree with, people from all sides of the political spectrum, different countries, different places, anyone who's got an interesting story, because it's all about, just hearing those different perspectives. I mean, I've always felt that it's weird with me, again, because I'm in the UK. If I talk about stuff that's happening in the US from my own perspective, sometimes people criticize me just because, hey, you're not Black American, so you can't
Right.
even talk on this. And I'm kind of like, well, I can have an opinion on
And we need
something.
it. We need it all.
Yeah. It's like I could have, the way I look at it is sometimes it's easier for someone to see a problem actually if they're not so close to it, right? If you're
Exactly. When you're not so emotionally invested and all that.
If you're standing a couple inches away from a painting, it can be hard to see, what picture is this? But if you're looking from afar, you're like, okay, I'm not emotionally tied up in this thing. I'm not historically tied up in this thing either, so I can look at certain things and be like, oh, okay, well, I think that and that is a problem, and I think that and that is, potentially a solution. And
right, it gives you opportunity to tell the artist, you might have missed a spot over here while he's all close to the painting. But we don't need the artist to then decide, well, I would rather act like I meant to do that than give you the opportunity to tell me that I missed a spot. That's the disconnect. You know what I'm saying? We're artists that are like in the midst of us coming to each other's aid, like, hey, this ain't hot. It's like, no, it is hot though. And it's like, but it's not though. So it's
charging different ticket prices based on skin color is not hot.
It's not hot.
That's not hot. That's not the way. That's not the way. I can kind of sort of see what I think you were trying to do.
You know what I'm saying? And that's facts. That's serious. And I need that known. Like, I understand the goal. I understand all of that. And I'm down with the goal for sure. But it's cool. I got some stuff for us. I'm gonna put some stuff out that'll really give us some just some knowledge on some opportunities that we have that, don't discredit like who we are. Like, we gods out here. I'm not trying to discredit any of that. Like, I'm really trying to make sure that our God self, like, we are in touch with our higher power, and we got to keep it funky to do that. We got to keep it a buck. We got to keep it 100. You ain't never seen no hate work. Like, you ain't never seen that work. So my thing is, if you look at it as a more of a, like, if you picture, and I'm like to get on my spiritual shit, and it is what it is.
Go for it.
I'm my spiritual stuff. But it's, if you look at it for like an aura, and let's say that now and before, so when Blacks are being oppressed now, and even at a higher level, you get this, let's say you get this crazy orange and red and black aura. Okay. So let's say that, we decide we're going to do something that parallels that energy. Even if the group that does it to us stops, that aura in the universe is the same color. How are we going to get any change in the actual, how we're moving, if the actual energy that consumes the space that we take up is the same? That is beyond me. You can really take your shoes and socks off, stick your toes in the mud, and get better answers. If you just ground yourself for a second, feel the breeze, you will understand that ain't it.
Yeah.
That can't be it.
Yeah. I mean, from an outsider perspective, and I've thought this for years, I think that, again, I don't like to use the term Black America because it sounds so, I'll use it because other people use it. Okay. Black America, the Black American community or whatever. I feel like, someone out there will get angry at me for saying this, but that's probably the point.
Right.
Is that I feel like people need to acknowledge and understand the history, but move beyond it. Like, I feel like people are dwelling and wallowing in the past. Even people who haven't grown up and lived through any of the horrible stuff that happened over the past couple hundred years. Maybe someone's, grandfather or great grandfather, directly was oppressed by certain people who are no longer alive, and but it's just like those grievances and that tension and that anger at some point, people like justified anger, so people almost like to hold on to it because it's like,
absolutely,
it's like this thing that you can kind of weaponize in a way, and
it even has a sexual energy to it, which is why you get, like, people get addicted to it almost.
Yeah. And I just feel like, look, because people are always like, oh, but what about the history? Or, oh, you don't understand this. And I was like, no, I understand it. Like I know what happened, right? I know what happened in the past, but at some point, as an individual, as a wider society, I just feel like you need to kind of draw a line in the sand and be like, okay, like let's look to the future.
Right.
Okay,
And from here, we just use it as knowledge and power, not
yeah,
as,
what can be done now? Not how can we reverse this and do the same to other people,
no.
and do the same to other people, but be like, okay, look, this is where we are now. These are some things that are affecting us internally. These are the things we're doing to each other, which we need to cut out and stop doing. And anything that's, because I look at it like this. I mean, I had do you know Candace Owens? You
Yes.
familiar with her? Okay, well, I was on her podcast on the weekend.
Okay.
So yeah, you can imagine I'm getting some interesting,
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of love and a lot of criticism, both.
Oh, yeah.
You know, um, but yeah, I mean, one thing I said with her is, imagine if you could completely eliminate all the racism in America overnight. You click your fingers, all the racism in everybody's heart, every race, it's all gone. Okay, are these problems still going to exist? And the answer is yes.
Hmm.
So people spend a lot of time focusing on racism or what people might call white supremacy or this or that. But it's like, if you get rid of all that, the majority of these problems still exist, right? Young men are
Right.
still killing each other in Chicago and in Baltimore and in LA, and like, oh, stuff is still going on, right? So the focus needs to be on fixing these internal problems
Right.
rather than always pointing externally and saying, oh, well, this happened to my ancestors, or this person's ancestors possibly did this, and it's like, I don't know. Sometimes it frustrates me because I'm just
No,
like,
right.
people just need to
Absolutely.
just move on from that thing. Like, you can dwell on it forever, but the past, you can never change the past. The past cannot be changed. It's immutable. It's
Right.
there. You can say this was bad, this sucked, you can learn from it and be like, okay, let's not repeat any of those things again. Let's not
Right.
do any of that again. And let's look to the future. How do we build bridges? How do we make things better? How do you make yourself better as an individual, as a family, as a community, as a town, as a city, as a country? All that. And that's kind of always where my head is at. So whenever people try to personally kind of like drag me into that dwelling on the past kind of thing, I'm always like, yeah, I get it. I get it. But, you know, and also just switching to being more gracious and having more gratitude, because,
Man,
I
say
don't think,
that.
dude,
Say
I
that.
don't think there are many people. I mean, a question I like to ask people is, do you think you had it worse than your grandparents?
Hmm.
And very few people can say yes to that. It's like, if you live in this modern era, you're living in 2019, you're in the USA, you're in the UK, you've got food to eat, you've got water to drink, the electricity works. I'm like, dude, you're better than 98% of the people, right? I'm like 98% of the people in the world will switch positions with you. In fact, they're trying to cross the border, go across the ocean. They're trying to do all kinds of things to get to where you are
Okay.
geographically.
While we speak
So
about it.
yeah, exactly. So it's like, again, I think maybe that's just having that more global perspective of
It's
being able to
important.
think like,
It's
yeah,
important. I wish it was seen as an asset more often and it was looked at as knowledge and experience, and not
mm,
as, oh, you've been in close proximity to those types of people, that makes you less of one of us.
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
like, no, I got some things I can say. I
yeah,
got some things I can tell you that you don't know about because you haven't been in those positions.
mm,
And I hate that I have to say that. I thought we yeah, I thought we were good on that. I thought that was just a given. You
yeah,
want to have as many varying perspectives within your objectivity as possible, so it can actually be true objectivity.
mm,
Like, I thought so.
yeah. And another one is, I mean, wherever you are, at the end of the day, you've got to live with people, right?
Period.
You're in a country of 350 million people. I'm in a country of 65 million people, and it's like, you've
People
you've got to get on with each other,
have
whether,
to.
so whether it's along racially, politically, social classes, sexes, sexuality. I'm like, look, you've all gotta live with each other, man. If you're in the UK, you've got, so obviously I think 2016 was obviously like a world changing year. Sorry, was a world changing year in many ways, because obviously in the US you had Trump's election, in the UK you had the whole Brexit thing, right? The whole leave vote. So, and the way that just kind of fractured and splintered certain people to me has just been crazy, because I'm like,
Has been crazy.
yeah, it's been crazy, because I'm like, you don't want to ever be in a position where you're demonizing like 50% 50% of your fellow citizens. Okay. So if someone normally votes Democrat and they just think, oh, Republicans are evil, everyone who voted for Trump is this, everyone, I'm like, dude, it's not like that.
That's a
it's,
huge amount of
it's,
hate to have
it's,
to maintain
uh,
in your own spirit.
it's
Like
like, dude,
that's
that's you. If you think 100, if you think like over 100 million people in your country are just these like evil, I'm like, dude, like that's not. Firstly, it's factually incorrect, because
right.
some of those people might even be your friends and they've just been quiet about it. Some of them are with your friends at school. Some of the those are their teachers. Like
Right.
like it's pretty 50-50 on a lot of these things.
Absolutely.
So I've never understood this idea of just wanting to. I guess I understand it in a way, but I think it's very silly and short-sighted to take this approach of just trying to silo yourself. I'm just going to interact with people who look like me, think like me, believe what I believe, act like me in certain ways and whatever. It's like, yeah, sure, associate with those people, absolutely. But you also want to be reaching out and trying to understand other people's perspectives, and going to different places, meeting different people. And I think if you do that, I mean, I know with myself personally, having been to 30 something countries and 100 plus different cities, I think most people are good people. Like
You know,
most,
it's
most people are cool, man. Like most people are cool. Just talk to people, engage people as individuals,
as
and
individuals,
you'll find that, oh, okay,
you'll meet a lot more decent people than you will
by far,
indecent.
especially if you approach people with kindness. If you approach people with
Absolutely.
hostility,
Absolutely.
you're going to get hostility back. It doesn't matter if it's online or offline. If someone just jumps into your Twitter mentions right now and is like, Tiny Jag, your automatic reaction is going to be defensive. You're going to want to defend
Period.
yourself. You're going to, maybe if they call you something mean, you're going to want to call them something mean back. Whereas if they're like, oh, hey, no, and you're like, oh, cool, thank you. That's not,
Yes.
it's,
I mean, it's
it's
even at
very
a
simple.
chemical level. Your body starts letting out particular, you know what I'm saying? You
Yeah.
get different things in your bloodline, in your bloodstream when you feel those different things. So it's even at a biological level, we're making people feel different types of ways before we're even giving them a chance to
Mm,
show us who they were before they felt attacked or
exactly.
before they felt intimidated by your aggression or
Mm,
the narrative you're trying to push before you even introduce yourself or whatever the case may be. So those things, I mean, reactions are serious. We have got to start moving in a way that, like I said, tactfully, because that reactionary stuff is more detrimental. If we would have been thorough and tactful with our approach, a lot of the time, like I said, we'll run into a lot more decent people and decent reactions
mm,
for
mm,
sure.
absolutely. So what is next for Tiny Jag?
Well, right now, this has put a huge rush on something that I had planned for a little bit later.
Okay.
But I am using this opportunity to make sure that I really sensationalize the ideas that I have to put equity and agency and financial stability into our community
Hmm.
for marginalized groups. Because I see now it must be either a lack of options that we thought we had or something. So I am not going to catch word of this and not share what I know.
Mm,
I would have shared it much earlier if I thought we were in this condition. So I'm definitely putting together content that can be fun and engaging, and still definitely tap those things right on the head, so that we can get to these places that we're trying to go, and that we hopefully eventually can come back together. Because I do know I don't know them very well, but these girls were not like complete strangers. You know what I'm
yeah, yeah.
saying? So I
Is,
do
is this
hope that.
the organizers, you mean?
Correct.
Okay.
So I do hope that eventually, we'll all be able to understand what happened, where to go, and all of that. But right now, I'm big on the awareness, because, like I said, I didn't even know this was an issue at this level. This was
Mm,
very eye-opening for me. And then just kind of getting together with the people that are close to me and my family that work with just like social work and children and anything like that. I used to be I used to be a peer educator as a teenager, where Teen Hype is a youth organization that I was a part of. It is local in Detroit. And we used to just go out and educate our peers on navigating just at-risk situations. So whether it be through any type of art, we did a lot of acting, a lot of dancing, a lot of shows, a lot of just lectures. But we went to a lot of DPS school, all of DPS schools, and Detroit public schools, and made sure that we tried to connect with the youth about these things from a peer level and not from a guardian or from a position of power down to, because I know that the ears, it doesn't always lay on the ears properly when it's coming from mom or it's coming from teacher or whatever like that.
That's
so
true.
I was a part of that. And then as an adult, I was a child advocate through social work, getting children ready for court and things of that nature. If abused children of Wayne County, which is the county that we live in, that Detroit is in, getting them ready to fight for justice for themselves, unfortunately. So this stuff is close to my heart. And I also, but I said all that to say that I have resources. I have a lot of resources because of those positions.
Yeah.
And others, but those are probably the two I was most instrumental in. Those resources, I plan to rally them up as well, so that we can definitely use this as an opportunity to show what we could do and what we could have always been doing and what is already going on, and things that we can support that don't alienate anyone and that don't cause this type of rift in the goal.
Awesome.
Thank
That
you
sounds
so
beautiful,
much.
man. Awesome. Awesome. I'm just looking at the time. We're coming up to an hour. So why don't you let the listeners know where they can find and follow you online?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Tiny Jag, tiny like small jag, like Jaguar, JAG. I'm Tiny Jag on Instagram. I'm Tiny Jag on all your streaming platforms. That includes Apple Music, Spotify, Tidal. Some stuff is on SoundCloud. I have stuff on Deezer. I know that's popular in like France. So yeah, but all your major streaming platforms, YouTube, I'm Tiny Jag on all of those things. The only thing I'm not Tiny Jag on is Twitter. I'm Tiny Jaguar.
Okay.
Hopefully I maybe have made enough noise now that they'll give me my name and not the person that only tweets once a month.
Oh, okay.
But I am Tiny Jaguar on Twitter, but Tiny
Awesome.
Jag on everything else.
Where did the name come from? Last question.
Yeah, Jag is my initials, actually. JAG.
Okay.
And Tiny, I used to date a producer, and for some reason my first name Jillian, he used to put small tiny Jillian. He used to call me that all the time, and for some reason the Tiny stuck, and we threw it on Jag, and it was that as a moniker for me, because I also own a juice business. I'm also trying to get fruits and veggies in the hood. So
Oh, nice.
So it was really a moniker for just my position in the conscious community in Detroit, but it ended up being my musical moniker once I got back into the music as well.
Awesome. Tiny Jag, thank you so much for joining the show today.
Zuby, man, I could cry. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
You're most welcome. I respect you massively. So keep standing up for what you believe in and keep
Thank you.
speaking out.
Talk to you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.